Ramacciotti, I'm a vascular surgeon here in São Paulo, Brazil, and also professor of thrombosis and hemostasis at Loyola. And I'm very happy to talk about coagulation cascade targets all vein specialists should not miss in 2020. And I have a fair number of disclosures because I work with the all anticoagulants development. So going straight to the point, let us talk a little bit about the coagulation cascade from the surgeon perspective, myself. So if you have the stimulus to have thrombosis on top of fibroblasts on monocyte surface, we have the activation of tissue factor and immediate activation of factor 7 and the release of TFPI. This combination with amplification of tissue factor release clivates 10 to 10A and immediately converts 5A that converts 2 to 2A in a self-limiting situation. If the stimulus continues, we have factor 8 broken apart from its factor von Willebrand, an activation of factor 8, activation of factor 5, activation of factor 11 to 11A, platelet activation, and on the surface of activated platelets, we're going to have more tissue factor release with activation of factor 9. In the presence of factor 8A, the conversion from factor 11 to 11A, and now with amplification 1,000 times, 10 to 10A, that converts 2 to 2A in the presence of factor 5, and in the presence of stabilizing factor 13, the conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin, and finally to stable fibrin. So see, we have the intrinsic and extrinsic pathway kind of dynamically intertwined. Well, this is not a big deal, everybody knows that. So let us go to targets, to the regular targets and to the new targets of coagulation cascade. But before that, let us talk about our intrinsic self-defense against thrombosis via endothelium, via protein C and protein S that blocks factor 5 and factor 8, and via antithrombin 3 that blocks 10, 2, 9, and 11. Okay, first drug, vitamin K antagonists. Vitamin K antagonists decreases the synthesis of factor 2, factor 7, factor 9, and factor 10. Everybody knows that, but this is the target for vitamin K antagonists. Heparins and low molecular weight heparins, they are indirect inhibitors of the coagulation cascade via antithrombin 3, blocking and decreasing the activity of factor 10, factor 2, and the release of TFPI. So both unfractionated heparin and low molecular weight heparin are indirect anticoagulants that needs antithrombin to act. The ratio between factor 2 and factor 10 inhibition is different between heparin and unfractionated heparin. It's 1:1 to unfractionated heparin, 1:4 with low molecular weight heparin. Okay, fondaparinux, which is the pentasaccharide, still a indirect inhibition of the coagulation cascade via antithrombin, but now a more selective factor 10A inhibition. And the development of fondaparinux led all the knowledge we have regarding factor 10 inhibition with direct anticoagulants. Moving on, this is not new. Direct 2A inhibitors, the most important, the bigatran, but we have other synthetic IV factor 2 inhibitors like argatroban, bivalirudin, and lepidudin, and it's a straight block to factor 2, decreasing stable fibrin. Direct, so the bigatran directly blocks factor 2. Now, the super well-known direct factor 10A inhibitors like apixaban, edoxaban, rivaroxaban, and betrixaban. It's a direct inhibition of factor 10A, very potent, almost generating zero thrombin generation with decrease of stable fibrin. Very potent drugs, and that's their mechanism. Direct inhibition of factor 10A. This is nothing new. Now, we're talking about new targets for the coagulation cascade, and the most important is the factor 11 inhibition. We have now studies ongoing with 3 of them: J&J 70033093, that is a co-development from J&J and Bristol Myers Squibb. We have Bayer's ozocimab, and we have also Ionis ASO, and they directly blocks factor 11, also decreasing stable fibrin. Here's some details on the factor 11 inhibition. Given the fact that we're not talking about the extrinsic pathway, we're talking about a compound, factor 11, that is not necessary for hemostasis. Therefore, inhibition of factor 11 can prevent pathologic thrombosis without compromising hemostasis. Meaning, we're looking for a gap in the development of direct oral anticoagulants. We're still seeing some bleeds, so now the development of factor 11 comes to fill up the gap of the bleeding indications. And the beauty of factor 11 inhibition is that we can combine it to dual antiplatelet inhibition. So at this point, we're doing some trials, phase 2 studies. We just started the dose ascending phase 2 study to prevent ischemic stroke or TIA in patients treated with aspirin and clopidogrel following guidelines. So we are comparing different doses of factor 11 inhibition in an escalate format to find the correct dose to prevent strokes. It is a 3,500 phase 2 study, and we're enrolling patients in this study, and we are also enrolling patients for the total knee replacement program. It's a phase 2 dose ascending with a J&J 7003-33093 compound, and we are in the beginning of enrollment for this beautiful phase 2 program. And if it succeeds, and I'm being part only of the Bristol Myers and J&J program, but I'm aware Bayer is doing the phase 2 too. Jeff White is leading it. We understand that factor 10 and factor 2 inhibitors have been validated for efficacy and safety in a variety of clinical settings, particularly stroke prevention, atrial fibrillation, VTE prophylaxis and treatment, CAD and PAD, and cancer-associated thrombosis. But we're still seeing some bleeding issues, particularly in the stroke area and the cancer area, where factor 11 might be a very exciting alternative treatment option for thrombosis management. So we expect that once we finish this beautiful phase 2 program from both companies and beautiful phase 2 design program, we'll probably move to a massive phase 3 program that is coming in the next years. So that's my presentation on the targets, coagulation targets, what the vein specialist needs to know. And this is my free Instagram channel for anticoagulation education. As long as you are a physician or a healthcare professional, just shoot me an inbox. I'll be happy to receive you. And every 10 days we have a live presentation discussing 1 or 2 or 3 different anticoagulation strategies, anticoagulants, doses, dose adjustments, everything on anticoagulation. Thank you very much.